We're building bag mounts on the Mighty Max today, guys, and we are going to get right into it. The first thing that I got to do is set the suspension height. Now, my project's going to be quite a bit different because this truck has been completely torn apart for a long time, so you might have to remove your spring, make control arms, so it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all video, unfortunately. But at least you'll have an idea of what's going to happen to the spring cup on the Mighty Max if you've got a Mighty Max. So I'm going to set the suspension height at the position that the suspension is going to be in when all the air is out and the frame is resting on the ground. Currently it's on jack stands, so we're going to have to add that to our measurements in a little bit. I'm running 20-inch wheels with the tires on it. The total diameter is 26 inches. The radius of that, half that from the center out, would be 13 then. So that means that the center of my hub to the bottom of the tire is going to be 13 inches. But the jack stands are 14.5, so we actually need to add that 14.5 to that radius, 13 inches, and that's where the center of the wheel is going to be. Let me do that math in my head real quick. I'm bad at math. 13, 14, that's 27, 27.5. The center of this needs to be at 27.5 while it's on jack stands. Currently it's at 22.5 about, so we need to raise this quite a bit. And this is one of the really cool things about these aluminum mock-up bushings that I've shown in previous videos. I believe I got these ones from Thorbros, but you can get them in a whole bunch of different places. They just allow you to weld on stuff without killing your polyurethane bushings. It's just an aluminum version of a bushing. But what's cool about them is the suspension works, but as soon as you tighten it down, it'll lock it in place so you can do stuff like this, which makes it really handy. We're going for 27.5, was that right? Not quite enough. That's ooh, snap. That last one was almost spot on. That's 27.5. I'm going to lock down these bolts so that it can't move ever again, or until I loosen the bolts. Our suspension is locked where it's going to be when this truck is laid out with the frame on the ground. And now we can move on. I don't need the knuckle anymore. In fact, it's going to be in the way if I leave it, so I'm just going to take that out so that we have all the room in the world to work. I think I'm probably going to take out this ball joint too, just so that I have more room to work. I'm about to cut the spring cup on the Mighty Max, and before I do that, there's one thing about the air spring that I absolutely need to know. In order to complete this job, we're going to need to know the overall diameter of the bag. We're going to need to know a whole bunch of stuff, but right now, all I need to know is the compressed height of the air spring. I'm using Slam Specialties bags. I believe the majority of their bags have a minimum height of 3 inches. That means when all the air is out and the bag is completely squished, this one's not, by the way, it actually takes a fair amount of strength and weight to compress, but when all the air is out and the top plate and the bottom plate are pretty much touching, that's the minimum height of the bag. Slam Specialties bags, I believe, are just under 3 inches, so I use 3 inches. The last time I checked, Slam Specialties says that they won't warranty a bag if they find out that the bump stops that are built into the inside of this bag are used. It's kind of weird. What are bump stops for if you can't use them? I don't know, maybe it's just a safety thing, but just keep that in mind. The minimum height is just under 3 inches, so if you set up your suspension so that it cannot compress the bag more than 3 inches, you won't damage your bag, you won't damage your warranty, and you will get every last fraction of an inch that your air spring has to offer. If there's too much space between your upper mounting point and your lower mounting point, like let's say we had 4 inches in there instead of the minimum 3, that's 1 inch of lift that you're not going to get. It's wasted. It's something you might want to do if you plan on having larger tires in the future, but it's a little bit more advanced. Hit me up in the comments if you want help kind of mathematizing that a little bit. Maybe you've got 17-inch wheels, but you want to go to 20s, but you want to bag it now. Makes things a little bit more difficult, but it can be done. But I'm using Slam Specialties bags with a minimum height of 3 inches. That's what we need to know right now. So the distance between the lower control arm and the upper bag plate needs to be 3 inches. Currently, our distance is less than 3 inches in the front, and it's kind of all kinds of wavy, so it's going to be different in a bunch of different locations. About 2.5 on the side, 2 3/4-ish in the front, way back in the back, it's like 1.5 inches. So the other thing that you need to know about an air spring is that when it's completely deflated and completely collapsed, the top plate and the bottom plate are parallel. Imagine an Oreo cookie, just perfectly parallel and flat. You don't want it like a Pac-Man mouth. It's going to be 3 inches on both sides. That means that my upper plate is going to be completely parallel with the top of this control arm. How do we do that? There's a million different ways you can do it, but here's what I do. Get something that is 3 inches high, like this little piece of metal that I had laying around, or make something that's 3 inches high, like a 2x4. You can cut that so it's 3 inches high, or whatever the minimum compressed height of your air spring is. Coincidentally, this little piece of scrap metal I have has some angled corners on it, which would actually be really handy for this bag cup because it kind of flares out at the bottom, and that angle is allowing the top of it to kind of reach in. We're just going to use this piece to mark the bag cup in all the places that we want to cut it to make it 3 inches. And I'm going to mark all the way around the bag cup. My little piece of metal isn't fitting in this back corner, so I'll just kind of eyeball it with the square. You're going to see a whole bunch of tools on this one because my little block doesn't fit in the back. My square doesn't fit in the back. I do have this type of square though, so I can reach it in and make sure that it's flat with the control arm and then mark it. Now I'm having a hard time marking this back side, so I'm going to mark where I think it is, and I'm going to cut a little bit below this line just to make sure that I don't cut off too much, and we can massage it a little bit later to bring it up a little bit if we need to. And now that it's all marked, I'm going to cut this entire thing off with a cutoff wheel. If I can't get a cutoff wheel in there, I might move to the Sawzall or maybe even the plasma cutter. But let's see if we can do it with the cutoff wheel, because that's what most people have. I'm going to chill with the cutting for a minute here. The cutoff wheel couldn't get all the way to the back, and that's probably a good thing, because as I was looking at it, I think I want to make a little change to this line. This line, we're not cutting. Instead, we're going to drop this down to the bottom of the frame to kind of create a gusset that we don't have to add. Because this entire spring pocket on the factory Mighty Max and D50 is actually connected to the cross member that goes under the engine. It is no longer connected with my custom cross member. So just keep in mind that this spring pocket is actually what's going to be lifting your entire truck. It's going to be what's holding the weight of your engine and the passengers and the entire front half of the vehicle. So I don't want to cut off too much here. We might even build this up later to make this a little bit stronger. Definitely going to be keeping an eye on it in the future. That's something you got to do when you're building a car. Every single one of them is a little bit different, and you probably don't have the money to make several of these and test them and put hundreds of miles on them and see how they're doing. So you just got to do your work, do the best you can, and then check on it frequently and make sure that this whole thing isn't like cracking and trying to tear off because you're bouncing up and down on the freeway, putting all that weight on these spring cups that have been heavily modified. We're going to do our best and at least try to add some gussets. Do you still call them gussets if you're not adding to it? Just know that I have never taken any engineering courses, so you need to be taking everything that I say with a grain of salt anyways. But just know that stress does not like corners. For example, this corner right here, if I were to leave that, it is very likely that a crack might form right here and just travel up and just break off this whole spring pocket. So you want to get rid of any corners that you see like this. Part of the way we're going to do that is we're going to drop this down into that little gussety shape, a nice gradual curve all the way down to the bottom of the frame. And the same in the front. That may get in the way of the airbag later, but we will worry about that then. For now, we're just going to leave it there and continue on. This control arm is in the way of some cutting tools and stuff like that, so I need to drop it out of the way, but I'm going to need it there in the future. So what I'm going to do, rather than have to put the knuckle back on and reposition everything, I'm just going to measure from the ground to the bottom of the control arm, which is 21 1/4. I'm going to mark it somewhere where I'm not going to forget. Now I can get the control arm out of the way, and then later, when I want to put it back in this position, I'll just put it back at 21 1/4 and tighten everything back up again. For all the shows that make this stuff look fun and easy, it's usually fun, but not always. All right, let's see how we did. 21 1/4 and 1/4. There, can I hold it? Let's see. Yes. How'd we do? 3 inches? Not quite. Need to trim that a little bit more. That looks pretty good. Not quite on this side either. Not quite. And that looks good right there. So, got to even it out a little bit. It's a little wavy, not a big deal. But before I do that, we're going to talk about how I'm going to mount these bags to the spring cup, because that's going to play into where we actually trim this in the end. Now, we need something to attach the air spring to. Pretty much every bag has some holes that are threaded. Some might have some studs on the top, but typically it's just a single metal plate that attaches to the bag with a few bolts. But what if you have a car like this where you can't access those bolts? What do we do? A couple rapid fire ideas that I can see right now is maybe cutting a little notch on 2 sides that's just big enough to get a nut or a bolt in. Probably be really tough, but you could do it. And then tighten everything down with a ratcheting wrench. This one, there's not really any way of accessing stuff on the top, so we got a bit of a problem. On my first D50, what I did, even though this spring cup is round, what I did was made some square plates. So I had corners sticking off, and what I did was I drilled through these corners so that there was holes, and then there was a second plate that screwed to the top of the bag, and then the 2 plates would bolt together. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't really have any way of explaining that, but looks like there's actually enough room if you were to put holes back here that you could put bolts there. But it doesn't seem to be necessary, at least from my experience, because the weight of the vehicle is pushing down on the air springs. So more or less, you just want to keep the bag from popping out left or right or anything like that. There's not a whole lot of pulling down on it, unless you set something up wrong, but I imagine we'll talk about that sometime in the future. I have mounted air springs several times in my life, and it's just not fun for me anymore. So on this one, I want to try to get a little bit creative. Several years ago, I was working on a truck that, for whatever reason, I can't remember, you could not put a bolt in through the bottom of the bag. So I had to come up with some way of installing the bottom plate of the bag so that it was secure, but it didn't require any tools. And what I came up with was this fancy plate that allowed you to slide the air spring in, turn it 90 degrees, and it would lock in place. Absolutely no tools. And then it was the 2 bolts on the top of the bag that would keep the bag from rotating so the bottom of the bag could never come out. That's the kind of stuff that really makes me like the whole fabrication thing. Doing the same thing over and over and over again isn't fun. So I always have to challenge myself and try to come up with usually something extra. So for that, I apologize. There's going to be easier ways of doing this, but on this truck, what I've always wanted to do is make a 100% tool-free bag change. I could put an air spring under the seat in the truck, and if we ever blow a bag on the freeway, we can quickly change out an air spring within just a couple minutes. It's something I've always wanted to do, and I think that's what I'm going to do on this one. What am I going to do? How am I going to do it? I don't know yet. I got some ideas, though. In short, I'm thinking that the air spring mounts are going to be inspired by this, which we have all seen. They are holes with some slots that sit down and lock onto a bolt of some sort. It's simple, it's brilliant, it's secure. The only difference is I want this to be similar to that rotating bag plate that I made, that instead of sliding the bag, you're going to put the bag in place, get all the bolts into their holes, which may or may not be challenging, and then rotate the bag one direction or another to lock it in place. And then to take it out, turn it the other way, pull the bag out. It's that simple. At least it's simple in the head. It might not work all that well in practice, which is pretty common in this garage. Ironically, these bag plates look very similar to what I had in mind. It's got these kind of bean-shaped holes. I don't remember where I got these plates. They're just laying around, otherwise I'd give credit. These bean-shaped holes aren't meant to be like any kind of fancy locking mechanism. They're simply for vehicles where either the holes aren't perfectly drilled or the plates aren't welded on perfect. It just gives you a little bit of movement so that you can get the bolt started, because perhaps you can get the center bolt started just fine and then the other one is just off a little bit and you can't get a bolt in there. So they tried to make it easier on you and did these elongated holes. This is very similar to what I'm imagining, except there will be some much larger holes on the ends. These holes will be large enough for the heads of whatever fasteners I decide to use. It probably won't be a fastener like this, but it could be. This one's definitely too long, but if I could find a shoulder bolt that has the correct size threads, that only has a shoulder that's the thickness of this plate, I guess we could use something like that. But the whole point is that the whole thing will rotate and then you can pull the bag off because the head drops through the hole. That makes sense. Makes sense to me. Let's just do it and see what happens. The fancy fastener store where I get all of my nuts and bolts is closed today, so unfortunately we can't go and figure out what they have. But I came up with 2 options that I'm super happy with, both of them. So no matter what they have, I think I can find what I need and we can continue on making the mounts today. Plan number 1 is to see if they have a shouldered bolt like this that only has a 1/4 inch shoulder. For some reason I'm thinking they don't, but whatever. If they don't, then I'm going to get some flange bolts. This is metric, so it won't really work, but it's got a nice flange on there that would play really nicely with our little keyhole design. I can't just put these bolts in the hole because I have to be able to tighten these bolts so that they don't wiggle out. And I don't want to tighten them down so tight that they bottom out, because that'll probably damage the bag. So, does that make sense? So what I came up with is just making some sleeves, and then I can tighten the bolt down on those sleeves. And then voila, I have the shoulder bolt that I was looking for. So I'm happy with both of those options. So I'm gonna go ahead and not waste my time and continue on making some bag mounts. And we'll get the fasteners tomorrow. I think we're gonna skip right over the cardboard part of the template making process and go straight to the wood. So we're gonna make a couple of plates that fit this air spring right here, and it needs to fit the spring pocket over here. And I already know that this plate is close. Maybe if it was a 1/4 inch on either side, it would be good. So we can use this. See here, this is just under 6 inches. 6 inches would probably be good, but let's do 6 1/4, just because. Got my handy compass here. We're gonna set this to 3 1/8 because that doubled is 6 1/4. Now we're gonna make the center point in here somewhere around the center. We're gonna make a circle. This is the full size of the plate. Now let's see here. The actual size of the bag plate is 4 1/4, so 2 1/8. I don't think I need this measurement, but I'm gonna put it on there anyways. It's 2 1/8. That's the actual bag plate, which I guess is probably good. We know that if we're marking any holes or anything that go beyond that, we're way off where we need to be. So I guess it's good that it's there. Next, let's do the holes. The holes are 1 3/4 inches apart. What is that in half? Half of 1 is like half. Half of 3/4 is 3/8. So 1/2 and 3/8. Not the right way of saying that, but 1/2 and 3/8. So that's 7/8. So this should be the bolt holes. We got the center bolt hole, if we decide to use that. The outer bolt holes, bag plate, and then the overall mounting plate that's gonna get welded onto the truck. All right, what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna draw a line across this thing right through the center. Hopefully that will help me line up all the things that I need to line up. For example, the bolt holes are right here and right here. Now I don't know what the actual sizes are going to be yet. So we're going to have a bolt hole there, one there. So these are actually going to be dragged a little bit, and they're going to be dragged in opposite directions. So one is going to go this way, one is going to go this way. How far? I don't really know yet. Probably do 1/8 of a turn or something like that. So let's do that. Let's split this into 8 parts. That's 4 parts. Nice. Hey, look at that. I drew my lines right at 1/8 turn. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to repeat this hole over and over again until it creates a little bean shape. Bean shape. I don't know how big the bolt head is going to be yet because I don't have it yet. And there's my mounting plate. That easy. But we got one more thing to do, because on the other side we have the port for the air. So we need to, oh shit. Oh boy, okay. I may have reached the end of this project already because of the port. So the way I have this drawn up right now, the air spring, at least from this point of view, needs to rotate clockwise to lock into place, which means that the air spring will initially be in one position, and then when you turn it, it will lock into place. This port, I found, was directly on the same line as the bolts, but it is 90 degrees from said bolt, so the port is going to be right here. And the port is significantly larger than any of the other holes. This is being generous as far as being too small, but say the hole needs to be at least this big. And this hole also needs to be bean shaped, which would bring it this direction. This is encroaching into this one, so it kind of makes this bolt hole pointless. Oh, it's basically two pie shapes. Ah, so that means it lands right on top of this one. Wait, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Oh, come on. All right, I've been staring at this for a while, and I think this might still work. I'm just going to drill some holes in this piece of wood and actually make the wood version to see if it's actually going to work the way I'm thinking. Well, I don't really like it. I don't know if I hate it yet. I don't know if it's a good idea to use it or not, but let's you want to see if it works? Let's see if these bolts fit first. Well, the head fits nice. All right, let's see here. Got 2 Allen bolts. I said we got 2 Allen bolts. There it is. So that works as planned. And then you rotate it to lock it. I still don't like it. I didn't need to make this bean hole so damn big. I could have stopped it right here. So this would have had a lot more metal. I'm gonna make this whole thing all over again, but make this hole a little bit smaller, and I will get back to you in just a moment. All right, I made another one, and it's better, but the bean hole is still too big, so it still encroaches into that hole right there. I could make another one still, but I don't want to. I've kind of fallen out of love with this design. So, fun fact, this is another day, so I had time to sleep on it. I don't think I want to do this. I just don't. I don't like it. I'm going to try something totally different. The Lexus GX 470 came from the factory with air suspension in the rear. The way those air springs mount is really simple. It's just 2 little weenies. One little weenie on the top has a thin metal clip that holds everything together, and one little weenie on the bottom with no clip. It just sits in a hole. The entire thing is held together with the weight of the vehicle. The only downside is that if you lift the vehicle in the air, the bottom weenie will pop out of the hole, and when you set the vehicle back down, you have to kind of guide its way back in. But if you know about it, it's not that big a deal. So if the GX 470 doesn't need any hardware to hold the air spring in, why can't I do the same thing? If this pre-made plate fits, I'm going to use it to help me design this thing lickety-split. And yes, that looks perfect. So I am just going to trace this out. So my plan is to create a clip that attaches to both of these bolts. And I'm not exactly sure how to do that yet. So I'm just going to cut this about what I think I need, but a little bit bigger. And then I'll whittle it down if necessary. I'm going to come over. This is the bolt hole, so this is where the clip is going to stop. So I don't think I need anything below these holes. And I want to have about 1 inch or 1.5 inch tab sticking out from the front of the bag plate. And then these holes are just going to get extended. I don't know how much, but I don't think it needs to be much more than that. Okay, I'm going to use a razor blade to cut these out. All right, there's my useless prototype. You want to see what I had in mind? We're going to put the bolts in there. Very similar to how we were talking about before. I'll probably have a sleeve in there so that I can tighten these down. And then the clip, which, now that I think about it, isn't going to make sense to you just yet. So what's going to happen is I might be using these pre-made plates. I don't know yet. I don't need all this extra movement, so I don't know, we'll see. But these holes will be bigger so that they can drop over the bolt, and then the clip comes in from the front. And this would be a very tight fit. That's pretty much it. This is just cardboard, but the air spring is now mounted to the plate. By the way, this clip will be trapped inside the spring pocket. I will not be able to pull it out any more than that because there will just be a tiny hole right in the front for this, and then you'll be able to drop the bag out. Just doing this with this little piece of cardboard, I am really happy with that. I'm really excited, and I think I'm going to go ahead with this. All right, I created this exactly the same way as I did the first ones, except I didn't screw it up with all the holes. So hopefully this will be perfect. And it's not perfect. I drilled this hole on the wrong side. It's supposed to be over here because this part is going to be facing me, and then I will need to put that in. So this port needs to be over here. That sucks. But still, the idea is the same. This out. We're not going to cut this out because that's in the wrong spot. We need that to be right here, but we'll do that later. Scary ghost. All right, here it is, my friends. Tomorrow, from Amazon of all places, I'm getting a piece of stainless steel so that I can turn this little guy into a real clip. Also, once these holes pass the heads of these bolts, this thing is super loose. So I'm gonna address that tomorrow as well. But here's a prototype, and I like it. I just got back from the hardware store where I spent several hours digging through their stuff trying to come up with something for this top plate, and I think I figured it out. These are shoulder bolts, very similar to what we used on the doors in Mark's bed, except these shoulders are only 3/8 inch long. So 2/8 plus 1/8 is 3/8. That's a very tight fit, and I am so excited. There's one issue that we have that somebody actually mentioned in the comments is a whole lot of slop that we have right here. Now, I've always had plans on getting rid of that slop, though I didn't know what it was going to be. Originally, I thought that these were going to be threaded bolts, and I would put a nut down at the bottom. The nut itself would take up the slop. But now that we're doing these shoulder bolts, I've come up with something else, and that is DOM tube. This 3/4 inch DOM tube has a 1/2 inch hole, which is the same size diameter as this shoulder bolt. So the shoulder bolt fits in the DOM tube really tight. This 3/4 inch DOM tube fits nicely in the 3/4 inch hole, very tight. I need a 1/4 inch sliver off of this DOM tube, so I'm going to use the 1/4 inch plate to help me mark it. I am going to recommend that you do not do this. When you cut small pieces with a chop saw, these pieces like to go flying sometimes. Sometimes they end up in the guard, sometimes they end up across the room. I am going to add a little bit of weight. So hopefully it just drops off rather than flying across the room. But there's also a possibility that I get a pair of pliers lodged into my face. Well, my face is intact. Still don't do it though. And if you do, you didn't hear it here. All right, we've got 2 little sleeves. Do we call these bushings now? Fit nice in the hole. So let's put this on a bag and get the full picture. Haha. 1/8 inch gap. Yeah, buddy. Oh my gosh. Just a tiny little bit of wiggle. Just a little bit. You hear it? Can you hear it? And then we're gonna make the clip. Bam. Except the clip is gonna be an 1/8 inch thick. Oh, there's like no wiggle. Oh, I'm so happy with this. Okay, this is cool. I like it when things work out. It's a lot more fun than when they don't. The video you're watching ended up being an 1.5 hours long. So I decided to split it for the 4 of you that complain about my videos being too long. For the rest of you, don't worry, I'm not gonna make you wait until next week to see it because the video's done. I'll probably post it tomorrow. Also, you're probably going to see a lot of random ass videos come from me in the next couple weeks. Let me explain. My focus is the Mighty Max. I intend to work on the Mighty Max 24/7, 365 days a year until this thing rolls out into the street. The only time I'm not going to work on the Mighty Max is when the house decides to fall apart around us, which it's doing this very moment. And you better believe I'm going to film every second of it. We got a new kitten who I absolutely love, but my God, he's making it impossible to edit, so I've got to handle that. I've got a couple products that I promised I'd make videos on. So, though it may look like we're going to stray from the Mighty Max for a moment, I promise you, I promise you, I'm not straying, my friends. Just handling the stuff that needs to be handled. And until the next one, my friends, keep moving forward.